Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Integration Joint Board. I know that under Standing Orders 5.6 and 5.8.1, this meeting is being held by remote participation due to current restrictions and the impact on public attendance at meetings of the IJB. Whilst the public are excluded from attendance at this meeting under the terms of the Coronavirus Scotland Act 2020, members of the local media are in attendance via remote link. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be published online for public access after the meeting. Can all participants online please switch off their cameras and mute microphones when not speaking, and if you need to speak on any point, please use the raise the hand function in Teams or indicate you wish to speak by signalling on your camera or taking your microphones off mute. Officers are reminded to follow the protocols that have been separately issued with regard to their participation. And before we start the meeting, can I please ask the committee officer to do a roll call for members online to indicate they are present.
Good morning, Mr. Farrell.
Morning.
Mr. Campbell.
Good morning.
Ms. Haswell.
Good morning.
And of the non-voting members, Mr. Williamson.
Present.
Ms. Morgan.
Good morning.
Dr. Evans. Ms. Watson. Ms. Gens.
Morning.
And Ms. Adamson.
Good morning.
Mr. Guyan.
Morning.
Dr. Laidlaw. Later. And Ms. McFarlane. I think she also may be late. Would you like me to do apologies?
Yes, please.
I have apologies from Mr. Sandilands, from Lynn Tulloch and her substitute Ms. Hand, and from Ms. Campbell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to the agenda, and first is confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of June. John?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move the minutes. Maybe a comment on a matter arising from it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
There's no matters arising, it's just for accuracy of this meeting.
Okay, then I can move.
Okay, can I get someone to second the minute? Anybody online available to second those minutes?
I can, Jane.
Okay. Thank you. And the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of June?
I do have a query about point of accuracy.
On the 24th of June?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just in section, it's in the decisions on page, 16 of the pack, and it's talking about the 24 operational performance indicators. I agree that it was decided that they wouldn't be coming as a regular in the quarterly performance, but the word there, these are at management level or made available through national and publicly available reporting tools. I thought that was and made available through national publicity available reporting tools, because it's really important that those, we don't lose sight of those for the public.
Okay, Bryce.
Absolutely, that's a fair point raised, and I think that was the decision was that they would be for the public online and accessible through that medium, and also available for the officers of the management base to discuss them.
Okay, so we can make that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move as amendment.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, if we are happy to move on to item 1.
Mr. McGregor moved this to the second.
One second.
Okay, we'll move on to item 1 on our agenda, which is appointments to the IJB, and we have the Executive Manager Governance and Law, Mr. Research, to present.
Thank you very much, Chair and members of the IJB. This report deals with a number of appointments. In some respects might be seen as a tidying up exercise, but I'd like to make a couple of general observations first, if I may, Chair. The first one is that as an IJB, in my experience, the board is very good at having members given forward notification of potential absence, and as a result of that, the board is then able to take action to fill any gap and vacancy arising. And this report, I think, is testament to that. It anticipates periods when members will not be available, and it takes corrective action so that you have good cover during those periods. So, as I say, the board is effective at that. We have on occasion had a number of resignations, or more recently creations of new posts, and then we've had to take steps to fill those, and some of those vacancies had languished on the board for a period of time, but the chief officer undertook to take steps to encourage organisations to come forward with their nominations, and that having been duly done and been successful, recommendation 1.1 in the report completes that process and brings the membership of the IJB up to full capacity. So I think that's an excellent point to note in accepting this report. Then at recommendation 1.5, I would specifically mention that the arrangements spoken about there are in some respects really just for the guidance of the board, because what it does is describe what the statutory process is. And given that one of the gaps that the report otherwise deals with is the situation where your appointed vice chair will not be available for a period of time, and paragraph 1.5 just covers and amplifies the point that if you yourself, chair, are not present, then the person who takes the chair has to be an appointment of an NHS voting member. So we're never in a situation where it's just appointment pro tem, on the day or anything like that. There is actually a statutory process to cover that, and paragraph 1.5 brings that specifically to your attention. And then in relation to 1.6, I would again just mention, as I did earlier, that there has been an example of a period of time where the statutory position of chief officer has not had the original appointee in place. The board has effectively covered each of those situations with a person covering in that role. And the last appointment in that regard was of Mr. Chittick. Now, as the report sets out, there has been a subsequent formal recruitment process and the successful appointment of Mr. Chittick as the joint director across the services that the IJB has an interest in. And as the scheme provides, that leads to the appointment of Mr. Chittick as your chief officer. And I think that although it's sixth in the order of recommendations, I think it is important to note that this is an important day for the IJB, because you now have fully in place a very key component of the statutory makeup of your appointees. So I would also commend, obviously, recommendation 1.6 to you. Sorry about the long lead-in, Chair, but on that basis, I think that it would just be appropriate for me, first of all, to take any questions if anybody's uncertain of the contents of the report, but then perhaps for you to go through each of the recommendations 1.1 to 1.6 in turn, and to get members to formally note and confirm or approve the decision required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just open it up for any questions at this point. Any questions? Robbie, do you have a question?
Just wanted to formally move, that was all.
No question.
No questions.
Okay. Okay, I have one brief question from me. I just was seeking some clarity on 1.5. So I think it's just maybe the way it's worded in the report. When Ms. Hornet returns, will she return as vice chair? Yeah.
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 Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. I just wanted to confirm that. It's just a little bit unclear, but your explanation made it clear. Okay, if we've got no questions, then are we happy just to move on to the decision? So at 1.1, we're being asked to appoint Joanne Adamson as a non-voting member until 19th of July 2024. Are we?
Chair, could we not take, I'm in dangerous ground when I debate with Mr Reeser, but could we not take all the notings as a group and move the two appointments in addition?
And I'm happy to second 1.1 and 1.6 and do it 1.2 to 1.5.
Yeah, is everybody else happy with that?
Can I just say it gives me particular pleasure to see the two appointees in question.
Does anybody else have any comments on that?
Yeah, happy to concur with that, Lincoln here.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'd just like to welcome all of our new members and look forward to working with everybody. I think it's really important that as a board, everybody brings something to the table. It's not just about voting members and non-voting members. We're all here to do the right thing, and I think it's really important that we all remember that, and we're all here to work together. And I'm delighted to appoint Brian as the Chief Officer of the IJB. It's been a pleasure to work with him over this last period and look forward to continuing to do so. So,
Thank you.
right, happy with agenda item 1. We can move on to agenda item 2, which is the financial monitoring report to the 30th of June 2021, and Carl has taken that one.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is the financial monitoring report to the 30th of June 21, first quarter of the year. So the forecast at this stage is a projected overspend of 2.570 million. That consists of the 77,000 overspend on the SIC arm of the budget, and the NHS overspend is 2.5 million. But 1.3 million of that relates to acute services, and that's not directly managed by the Chief Officer. At this stage of the year, a recovery plan is not necessary because this SIC is working hard to address the projected overspend, and they'll provide an additional top-up payment if necessary. And the NHS overspend is the result of locum cost pressures, and it will be met by an additional payment as agreed during the budget setting. So as the IJB is a separate legal entity, is heading again for a break-even position at the end of the financial year. If you want to see the breakdown by surface area, you can see that on Appendix A on page 29. And it's just the same issues as we've seen for the last while. It's locum pressures in psychiatry, primary care and hospital medical services. I think there is some good news recently that there's a Bray GP being appointed, and there's new out-of-hours models being explored for psychiatry and hospital consultants. COVID-19 continues to place additional pressures across the surface, so the projected additional COVID costs for the year is 2.781 million, and at this stage we expect it to be fully funded by the Scottish Government, the same as last year. Lastly, I'll touch on the issue of financial sustainability. We're aware that the medium-term financial plan requires significant savings over the next few years. So there is a primary care transformation team being set up, and it's being supported by the PMO, and that now has 3 work streams in place, and each of them has an executive sponsor. So the plan is to have detailed implementation plans, including any financial savings that may arise, available by the end of the calendar year. So that will be presented by IJB in due course. And the other thing is, Service Managers has been working on this wraparound process where they're having meetings. We support services to try and develop service plans and budgets for next year. So we're hoping that process will feed next year's budgets and subsequent directions, and that will have some actions on how we're going to address the unsustainable funding that's in the medium-term financial plan. So that's all I want to say about this report, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Carl. Okay, I'll open it up for questions now. Robbie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the report, Mr Williamson. I'm particularly pleased, you'll not be surprised, I'm very interested in 4.7. The fact that temporary staffing overspends we're actually the cause of the overspend in the budget. I know I'm becoming extremely boring on this matter, Chair, but I will continue to raise this at every opportunity. What contribution to the difficulty in recruiting permanent staff and avoiding temporary staff overspends is the difficulty of is there available staff on the mainland, or is there a national shortage? And secondly, to what extent does the lack of suitable housing in Shetland cause difficulties for potential recruitees? I know these are, strictly speaking, not financial questions, Carol, but I'd be grateful to have your thoughts on the matter. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my understanding is that there is a national shortage of certain specialities such as psychiatry, and it is difficult to get consultants to come up to Shetland because, again, a lot of them is working in specialist services, so you need to get a general all-rounder come up to Shetland, so that can be difficult to attract consultants up here. And as far as housing goes, my understanding is that is an issue as well, because the board has been looking at how it can expand its property portfolio, so that's an issue. But perhaps Brian wants to add some detail around that.
Thanks, Hannah. Brian?
Thanks.
Just to say, we did have a meeting yesterday, colleagues from Scottish Government, and that was the one risk that we really had a really in-depth conversation about, was the workforce issue right across health and social care. It is a national problem at the moment, of which there has been some conversations about how we nationally put extra resource into, in particular, GPs mentioned, and that is one of the areas where we are struggling to fulfil our substantive placements, as well as even getting agency and locum input into that. So that is a nationally recognised kind of area where there is a pinch point, and there will be a national kind of project to address that from a national perspective. So I think there is realisation that across both health and social care nationally, the resource is spread very thinly, and it's really about the engagement at the national level to influence the conversation about what we can do with respect to a national way forward, as well as how we address things locally. With respect to the question about accommodation, I maybe need to take that away. Councillor McGregor, and have a look at a conversation with the managers who are undertaking the recruitment to see if they've had any feedback about that being a specific issue regarding people not being able to come to the Shetland.
Thank you very much, Carol, and thank you for these very few answers. I have a particular interest in housing as far as recruitment is concerned. If someone comes to Shetland and wants to build a new house, you're talking about up to 2 years before the necessary consents can be in place. So I know this is, strictly speaking, not an IJB matter, but I'm desperate to visit any port in a storm that we seem to have to discuss the the temporary staffing costs at every meeting. And if there's any minor tweak that can be done to the system, I certainly will be advocating it. So my apologies, I'm slightly off piste on this one, but you'll forgive me. The motives are sound. Thank you.
Right, you're forgiven. Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Just maybe to add to the conversation about recruitment and retention of medical staff and reducing spend on locum temporary staff. I've had a few conversations with medical colleagues in Shetland about this, and one of the things that's come up is the ability to train GPs, particularly in the primary care workforce, the ability to train GPs in Shetland. The GP training scheme is a 3-year scheme, and if we're able to recruit GP trainees to Shetland during that 3-year process, then we're increasing the likelihood of them being able to settle in Shetland before they finish their training. I think that's shown to be significant in terms of looking at existing GPs who've settled in Shetland. They weren't trainees here, and the idea is that if we can expand our ability to do postgraduate GP training in Shetland and support training practices in Shetland to be training practices, then we increase our likelihood of being able to get GPs to settle in Shetland.
Thank you very much. Jane, did you have your hand up?
I did, but that was a really interesting point that was made there. I was just going to thank Brian for the update of the national discussions, because it clearly is that's what, as an IJB, we have been asking for. So that is good to hear that is going back up, because it's very clear that it's across all health and social care, as Brian rightly said there, and it is a national shortage of people in every, whether that is within the catering facilities, the cleaning facility, everywhere there is such a huge issue, and it is a national issue there. So thank you for that update, Brian. And can I just ask, Brian, is there further meetings scheduled on that point?
Yes, there will be a monthly meeting now held between our colleagues in the Scottish Government who are related to the performance aspect of IJBs and health and social care partnerships. So it will be something we'll keep on our agenda, certainly championing the national problem, but also how that is then transposed into our local kind of problems and problem solving here in Shetland.
Thank you. I think a national monthly is essential. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Chair. I thought for a moment we surrounded the debate, so I'll bring it back to the question. It's on the back of Mr. Armitage's comments. Can you tell us, please, how many of the GP practices in Shetland are training practices?
Do you want to say?
One Lerwick Health Centre.
That's all. Yeah. Okay.
If I could just come back on that, it's the sort of governance around that and the facility that needs to be accredited, and the trainers need to be accredited, and there needs to be sufficient workflow and support around the aspects of a holistic kind of support network around the GP trainees. It needs to be a larger practice to support that.
Can I come back? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kitt. That makes absolute sense. But as things have moved on in the last decade and a half, the practices tend to be salaried practices opposed to being on the GP contract, which I would have thought would have allowed an element of fluidity between utilising the resources between all the different salaried practices. Therefore, does it follow that there's an opportunity for a salaried GP within Lerwick Health Centre to have that support within Lerwick Health Centre, but actually conduct a lot of their practice within one of the other settings?
I'm not specifically sure about the governance around that. I would need to take that away and come back to you, speaking to the trainers, what that implication would have. But on the wider picture, we have been flexing staff between our salaried health centres to provide some resilience, just as we know the GPs and the primary care staff are spread thin. So it's not just GPs, we've also been flexing advanced nurse practitioners and community nursing as well in between the practices to provide support and resilience as well. But the specific question about the ability of trainees to be working out with their trainee location, I can take away from get back to you.
No, I appreciate that, and Mr. Tipping, it's not in any way trying to be difficult or challenging. It's trying to be solution focused, and if somebody can have their mentorship, for want of a better expression, within one point of Lerwick Health Centre and have that connection, but be able to, on occasion, be able to authentically live with it, wherever it may be. Just that, well, actually not live with it, practice. But one of the other practices, then perhaps that might increase the opportunities for GPs to go.
Thank you. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think in the last 20 years, there's been some other practices that have been training practices that have been worked recently, and I think Yale Health Centre was a training practice a while ago. So I wonder whether there is potential to expand the number of practices in Shetland that have trainers, and I know it's not just a question of pushing more money at the issue, it's about enabling GPs to become trainers, and that requires a lot of time and support. I think in looking at things in the long run, having more postgraduate GP training in Shetland would be very good, not just for our workforce, but also for our workforce sustainability as well.
A question, Robbie? Yeah, go for it.
I'm conscious I seem to be spending the whole day apologising. I'm straying into operational areas. In my own profession, we used to go to the pharmacy schools all over the country to their job fairs and fly with the flag for people coming to our organisation through their postgraduate training. And if you manage to recruit for that 1 year, the number of people that continued in employment when they were qualified was quite spectacular. So I just wonder, the question is here, I just wondered if consideration could be given. There may not be job fairs at medical schools, I don't know, but if there are, could consideration be given to putting a stand, if that's the right word, up at perhaps Edinburgh and Glasgow and Dundee, and see if perhaps any recruits can be obtained at that one.
So I certainly know in the past there has been engagement at GP conferences and medical schools and other areas where we've had senior medical staff going out, rural kind of workshops and things like that as well to try and aid that recruitment. I'm just not sure where we are at the minute with a lot of face-to-face activity being paused, but maybe as we start to do more face-to-face kind of conferences and things, that would be something that we could prioritise and get back onto people's agendas to start spreading that word.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got Lincoln next with a question. Go ahead, Lincoln.
So, thanks, Chair. Probably more of an observation.
Well, do you want that until we come to them? We're just taking some questions at the moment. I can come back.
Just around, I'm just around, obviously GPs is a huge issue, and I think that's what John had mentioned. I think it's really useful. Just around looking further ahead, I guess, developing a young workforce, Brian, that's something that I wonder if we could look at that for engaging young people in schools to look at careers in medicine. And I know Developing Young Workforce Board in Orkney did that sort of before the pandemic with S3 and 4 students who are considering medicine. So looking at the longer term and offering opportunities for young people from Shetland to look.
Come back on it, please.
We seem to have lost.
I think we had a temporary glitch there. I think we're all back online though. Carol, can you hear me?
I can hear you good, yeah. I lost Lincoln for 30 seconds there, but I can hear everything else fine.
I can hear what's going on. I can hear Cole and so on, if that helps. Colin Campbell, yeah.
Hi, Colin. Thank you. Yeah, I think we just had
I think
we
we've
had this
lost the
problem.
main
Yeah,
meeting maybe. Because my pictures have all changed and it's just Carol that's on the screen now.
so just bear with us.
Hello, can you hear me now, Anne?
Yes, I can. Yeah, it's not a great connection. I think we've had the same problem as we had yesterday. The network went down momentarily, which is just threw a bit of a spanner in the works. Your camera's not on though, so we can't see you.
Oh, it says it's on.
It could just be because of the network.
I can see it on my bottom screen.
Yeah, let me just check with IT and see what the issue is. If I don't know if you want to just
Take a break for 5 minutes while trying to
break for 5 minutes and we'll see if it resets itself as it did yesterday. Thank you, Chair. We can see you now. I've spoken with IT and they're saying it's not a known problem with them, but they're looking into it. But I think most people are back online now. There might be one or two still to pop in, but I'll invite them back into the meeting. So
That's fine, thanks very much. Okay, Anne, is that us ready to recommence?
yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming back. Denise, did you want to come in on Lincoln's point? Thought you had your hand up. Possibly not. Brian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think the question about links in with support networks for younger people to get to positive destinations like EYW, Skills Development Scotland, those kind of agencies. We are having conversations with them. I think it's when we look at training of the medical workforce, it is quite a long time frame from that initial engagement at school kind of age through to getting an individual back fully trained and back into the medical workforce. So that would be a longer term kind of resource planning issue or solution that we would need to factor into our workforce planning. With respect to positive destinations in Shetland, I've got a meeting tomorrow with our new 12 modern apprentices who are coming into social care. So that's been a real positive kind of development in how we're trying to resource services moving forward. So I think there is work being done right across the piece at both the medical workforce and social care workforce and nursing workforce as well. So we are having this conversation.
Thanks very much. Further question?
Yes, Brian.
Oh, did you have another? Yeah, go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether we could look at, in terms of, and again, this is a bit of a long-term issue, but looking at the way that the military organise their recruitment as medical military posts, and maybe look to copy what they're doing. So when I was at medical school, I had a number of colleagues who were medical students who were supported by the Royal Air Force, Army and Navy to go through medical training, and they were given a bursary of, I think, £1,000 a term or something, some such figure, which obviously was a massive help to those medical students as they were going through medical school. £1,000 a term isn't very much for an IJB, but it's a huge amount for a student. And the flip side of that support for going through university was that they dedicated themselves to a medical career in the military upon graduation. I would consider that ourselves in Shetland needing to provide a sustainable workforce are in a similar situation to the military. And I wonder whether we could use some of those aspects. I also wondered whether we might have a kind of we could institute a kind of Shetland-wide community fund in the same way that the MRI scanner appeal and the CT scanner appeal has been done to sort of increase the engagement of the Shetland public in their future medical workforce sustainability. This wouldn't necessarily need to be confined to the medical workforce. It could also be for training for other key workers in Shetland. And I wonder whether that is something that could be looked into to solve some of our long-term medical staffing sustainability issues.
Brian?
Yeah. As someone who went through that same system, it is something that we have considered, bursaries and how we sort of govern that. I would say that the workforce issue on the medical side and the NHS side has been escalated with a bit of PMO support around getting some solutions, and certainly we can feed that in to that process as potentially a strategic maybe answer to some of the sustainability issues of recruitment and retention moving forward. But just to say, it would be up to the partners and in the health board and SIC, who are the employers, to engage with them, and and we will do that. You know, I think workforce right across the board, our partners is really high on everybody's radar. So certainly we'll feed those points into those processes that are ongoing.
Thank you. Layton, do you have a further question? I see your hand up.
Sorry, I was just going to, as chair of the endowments for the NHS, we've sort of had discussions around bursaries and various things. So that's something you wanted to bring to the endowment committee to have a discussion about how we could look at ways of doing things differently as well, because we are in very difficult times, and I think looking at how we deliver services and how we develop our workforce, I think it's an ideal time to look at how we do that differently and make it work for the Shetland context. So be happy to speak about that at that committee.
Sorry, we lost you there for a second. I'm not sure if you were still coming in with your question or if that was just a comment.
It was just a comment about the question around bursaries.
Okay, well, if we could just finish off the questions and then we can move into comment, that would help us get through one quickly. So does anybody else have any further questions? No, I have one question, Carl, and it's going back to the financial sustainability. You spoke about that we would see further information coming at the end of the calendar year on looking at the challenges within our medium-term financial plan and how we address this unsustainable funding. My question is, how are we going to ensure that we do stay on track to develop those plans and see them at the end of the year, given how busy everybody is in the service with all these other areas? So I just wanted to seek some reassurance that we're not going to lose sight of that, because if we don't tackle the bigger financial sustainability issue, it doesn't matter how much time we spend talking about the other things, we are going to be in a real situation that's not going to be difficult to fix, not going to be fixed. Go ahead, Carl.
Well, I mentioned that primary care transformation team has been set up, and I believe that has been well resourced. I mean, the PMO has set up really good project documentation around that, and I'm seeing a timeline that has that plans developed by the end of the calendar year. So I think staff is really focused to meet that targets. But as you say, the pandemic is unpredictable and things might come in the way, but that is the aim. And I think there will be updates going to the IJB at the special meeting in November.
Thanks, Carl. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just come in. Just to add on to what Carl said. Yeah, the aim is to have all the planning and the quick wins in that primary care transformation programme ascertained by the end of the financial year, with the aim to bring a paper before that to IJB, building on the paper that we saw last IJB on the themes that were coming out of primary care. This will be a lot more meat on the bone about what we're doing, how we're doing it, some of that sustainability hopefully solutions that you're seeking there, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that, Carl. No further questions? Thanks very much for your report, Carl, and we'll move to comment. If anybody has any comments they want to make on this report, I think there's been a lot of discussion in around the questions, which has been really useful and helpful. So if anybody has anything else they wish to add, fine. No? Oh, John?
I think just back to your comment there, Chair, I think maybe if you could indulge me, that I think we need to show due respect to the officers that are delivering the reports here today and maintain the structure of our meeting accordingly in order to allow them to respond to questions prior to entering into any political debate and discussion. And if members would be of a mind to follow such a structure, I think it would be courteous to the officer to present the report and keep us on track.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're just being asked to note the management accounts. I think it's clear that there's no surprises in these accounts, as there never is. We know the situation we're in currently isn't the real alarming situation. It is what that medium-term financial plan shows us is the significant challenges we're going to face if we don't come with those plans to change how we do things. So I think we're all happy to know. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 3, and that's Cal again, the financial regulations and IJB reserve policy.
Hey, thank you, Chair. This two documents is supplementary documents to the integration scheme, and it was planned to get both of these reviewed by September, so we managed to do that. And this document has already been at IJB Audit Committee, and the Audit Committee welcomed them, so I'm not going to go into any great detail with this document. The financial regulations has been updated to include the financial management code and just some minor changes to terminology based on the experience we've gained in the first few years of operation. And then the IJB reserves policy has been updated to make it easier to apply for IJB reserve. There's a process whereby you can build in reserves into your budget planning process, or you can use an application form for an ad hoc request to use IJB funds. So I just think it makes it a lot more transparent on how we can use the reserve. Again, happy to take any questions on either of these documents. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Cal. I'll open up the question first. Members, any questions? Jane?
Thank you. It did go to audit and we had a good discussion around it. Just one question, Carl. On the actual application form, the last bit for official use, is there merit in adding when the directions would be agreed by the IJB? So if the decision for the project is made to, the IJB accepts the project, at what point then would the directions, the IJB directions be
Yeah, you like to hit a point there. If it's a normal part of the budget planning process, it would go into the direction that was approved prior to the start of the year. But I was thinking if it was an ad hoc request, then if this was approved, a revised direction would need to come forward, including that additional sum of money. So I guess that is something that could be added.
Just so it's kept in that loop, and it would be an official date, wouldn't it then? And we could keep a track on it just to make sure that the directions came. So that was just my question. I'll have a comment when it gets to the comment stage.
Okay, but yeah, happy to take that on board, and I can look to revise the forum.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much for that, Carl. I'll go first to the chair of the IJB Audit Committee to maybe talk us through how it went at the Audit Committee.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully I won't break the teams again like I did last time I spoke. It went through really well. I think I suppose the important thing is, as well as reserves policy is really clear as well. And I think it's really important that we've got all this in place with potential changes coming through national care, that we're well organised and we have all our procedures in place. So there were no concerns from me regarding the papers that were presented.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Jane?
Yeah, just to say, I think it is important to highlight that there can be that ad hoc, and that keeps that agility for the strategic planning, and that can come forward. And I suppose as well in the form it does talk about potential for savings, but then there is the opportunity that if it's not about saving, as if it's about quality improvement, that is still a absolutely valid ad hoc application to come through. So it was just to make those points, and I welcome the clarity of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've been asked to approve the updated IJB financial regulations and asked to approve the updated IJB reserve policies. Are we happy to do that?
Happy to approve. Happy.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we move on. Thanks very much, Sal, for your items today. We move on to agenda item 4, which is the clinical and care strategy, and Elizabeth Robinson is presenting on this one.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me. The clinical and care strategy has been underway, under development for several months now. There was substantial engagement with the community, with practitioners, with people within the organisation. It probably was more in a virtual sense than it would have been if we hadn't been in the pandemic. But I think in some ways that actually gave us more opportunity to consult and engage with people who might otherwise not have been able to access maybe a physical building. There was a programme board which oversaw the strategy, and that was chaired by Jane Haswell. I think the main things to say is it is high level and it is overarching, so it has strategic aims which are around integrating services around the needs of local communities, making sure that care is provided in the right place at the right time, that it is wrapped around individuals rather than requiring individuals to go to lots of different places to get their services. And it makes best use of technology where technology is appropriate, so recognising that it's not always, sometimes the human touch is what is needed. So an action plan, the position now is that the clinical and care strategy will move into the action planning stage, and that is due to be incorporated into our health and social care and health board routine planning, so that it doesn't sit as something separate. We've also reviewed the clinical and care strategy in relation to the joint strategic plan, which we're currently renewing at the moment. And there's a lot of read across, and I think a lot of the engagement that's already happened will be really useful in feeding into the renewal of the joint strategic plan. So I think that's all I wanted to say for now, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Do we have any questions on this item? John?
Thank you, Lynn, Chair. It says within the report that mental health, look at ways in which we all use technology to provide more person-centred care. And I also try to be a little bit opportunistic and creative, and quite appropriately I was unable to bring up the Marcus Horizon on the minutes. Within the minute it did say it was agreed that more detailed information outside the meeting on what has been done by mental health services with regard to online smart recovery and 12-step recovery programmes. On that basis, I'd like to ask a question that ties in neatly here. I've been in discussions with public information officers in Highland and Egmont and Midlothian regarding this very matter, and how they engage with community pharmacists, GPs, and social work and criminal justice. Mr. Chippick and Ms. McDonald gave a mind to diarise a meeting to discuss my findings from that, in order that we can perhaps bring it to, we can move on from that to learn from best practice in other regions of the country.
I'll certainly be able to facilitate that, because it seems that that's linking into a lot of our kind of thought processes that are in this strategy, but also some of that work that's happening in the transformational change programme about hubby thought, how individuals access the right professional, right pathway, right time, right location, those kind of things. So if there is some learning from other health boards, I'll be more than willing to take that on board and maybe feed that into our change programme as well.
But I recognise from such a bit that both you and Ms. McDonald's diaries are very busy, particularly at this time. And so therefore it will be at a time that is most appropriate, and I expect that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Any further questions on the clinical and care strategy? Anybody? Haven't seen anybody. So thank you very much for that, Elizabeth. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make on this strategy? I'll maybe just, Jane?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Shetland public for their engagement with this, bearing in mind that it was also through the lockdown and extended pandemic situations. It really was a remarkable engagement, and I would like to also point out that all the PowerPoints, all the feedback is available on the NHS Shetland website. You can go into the clinical strategy page and you will see the actual presentations, etc. So that's a valuable resource for us all in the IJB to hold on to those comments from the participants. And thank you very much, obviously, to all the members of the programme board. It was really very successful. Thank you.
Thank you. But Lincoln next.
Thanks, Chair. I was trying to jump in before Jane to thank her as well, because I think it's a really comprehensive strategy. From a position of the third sector organisation, you know, we felt that we'd been consulted. Lots of third sector organisations felt that they were part of that, which is really important moving ahead. And I think that bodes well for looking at how we can deliver services in the community, and whether funding comes externally or from Shetland funding. We've got lots of options there as well. So really pleased with this, and again, thanks to the team involved in it, but Jane especially, who's put in a lot of time and effort to make this go through. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think it is really vital that this strategy is considered alongside our strategic planning process. So I did welcome those comments that made around that. There's no point having lots of different strategies if they don't work well to deliver the results that we want for our community. So we seem to have across council, NHS, IJB, there's lots of strategies going on, and they all have to work together, because ultimately that's what we're here for, is to deliver the best outcomes for our community. So I'm glad to hear that they're going to feed into that process. So thank you. Okay, thanks very much, Lisa. And we will move on to agenda item 5, and that's the Chief Social Work Officer report, and that's Denise Morgan to present.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. And if it's okay, I won't put my camera on because I'm having terrible internet problems this morning. If I disappear, I'll try and come back in. This report covers the period April 2020 to March 21. As requested by the government, there is a specific focus on the way services responded to COVID-19, but I've also included some of the service improvements and project work that has continued over the past year. It must be noted that staff across all services have worked extremely hard to ensure people are safe while still managing to respond to and work within complex government guidance and some change programmes. With regards to our response to COVID-19, all social work services remained open and staff responded quickly to the changing circumstances. Plans were put in place for remote working, and face-to-face contact continued where required. All care homes and care in the community operated as normal and were remarkable in working through a time when no one truly knew the risks associated with COVID-19. Their contribution to keeping people safe is commended. It was necessary to close daycare services and respite care in line with government guidance, and staff tried their best to introduce alternative support where possible. We also created the community hub that helps support individuals on the shielding list and those who had to isolate. The hub remains open to support those who are contact traced. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank individuals, families and our communities for their understanding and support over the past years. It's been very much appreciated. In order to help support our care homes, there was a multidisciplinary enhanced Care Home Assurance Group was established to provide real-time support and assistance to care homes and the managers. Each care home has received 2 assurance visits, and all individuals residing in long-term care have had their support plans independently reviewed as requested by the government. Good partnership working was evident across services and with the Care for People team to ensure an overview was taken of areas of concern and targeted support to those in need. The protection of vulnerable children and adults and the management of high-risk individuals remained a priority. There's been additional governance and reporting over the past year to both the Chief Officer Group and the government, and this has showed that the services fulfilled their statutory duties and maintained a high level of contact with service users across both directorates. Even though services have been extremely busy managing the complex changing environment, they continue to lead on some service improvements. We developed an overnight care service to support adults in their own homes and prevent the need for admission to residential care. Just as social work unpaid work scheme was suspended for parts of the pandemic, and the team used this opportunity to support other services with the preparation and delivery of food parcels and opened a free pop-up children's clothes shop. We were successful in becoming a pilot area for the new self-directed support standards, and we focus on empowering the social work workforce. Work is ongoing to meet the aspirations of the project, which affects all services that sit under this board. We have developed the Anchor Project Board to take an overview and support of early intervention work, emotional wellbeing resilience and community-led support. All projects are part of the Council's ambitions and some of them are part of our directions. The key challenges moving forward include recruitment to roles across all of social work and social care continues to be a challenge, and we are looking at ways, as always, to improve this, including a review of job descriptions and employment processes. We are very aware of the need to increase capacity and prioritisation of staff time in order to deliver on the transformational change agenda. There remains challenges in operating services within government guidelines, and we are seeing this having an impact on individuals and families, particularly those who are supported by day services and respite care. Individuals attending these services continue to be classed as high risk, and there are different physical distance guidelines in place to that of the community. Services are reviewing their risk management plans to try and increase capacity, but this is also occurring at the same time as all areas are reporting an increase in demand. We will continue to monitor the impact of COVID-19 and respond to emerging need. I would also like to take this opportunity to bring to the board's attention the current government consultation on the development of a national care service. This consultation follows the independent review of adult social care that was completed in February of this year. Although the review focused on adult social care, the government's proposal is that the National Care Service will encompass all social work and social care services for children, adults and justice social work. Legislative changes will need to be made as it will include the transfer of statutory duties and responsibility from local authorities to the National Care Service. This is possibly one of the biggest changes to public services, and it is vital that proposals are considered within the wider context of public service provision and the impact of these proposals on individual need and aspirations. It is vital that whatever structure is decided upon, Shetland works together to ensure the best care and protection for all. The board has already agreed consultation workshops, and the SIC is leading on 30 consultation workshops over the next 3 weeks, in which we will have the opportunity to speak to staff and discuss the consultation in some detail. That's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Denise. Okay, we'll open up for questions. Jane.
Thank you. Just questions. The trauma-informed practice training, Denise, absolutely agree with that and see that you're sharing that out across. Are you also sharing that and using some of the NHS trauma-informed training? Are you combining across the sectors? That was first question.
Thank you, Jane. The NHS, the IJB and the SIC all have their own local trauma champions. So I am the trauma champion for the SIC, and Karen Smith is a trauma champion for IJB, and Mary McRoberts for NHS Shetland. So we have got a plan in place. We are using some of the modules that is on NEST, but we're also have the SIC has some online modules. And I'm just in the middle of trying to produce a plan and a timeline. But we have a steering group set up, which includes third sector, NHS and the SIC. So we're quite looking forward to implementing this across the services. It is going to be long-term change because it has to be something that is sustainable, but it is a very important part of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And the one-stop, for once for Shetland agenda, as you highlighted, is good. My second question is just you highlighted that the care inspectorate visits obviously had been stopped. Have you got any timeline for those to be restarting so that the IJB can be informed about that side of the governance?
As some of the care inspectorate inspections have been ongoing on the mainland, been targeted at those homes most in need. We have no timetable as yet from the care inspectorate. They do tend to do and announce visits, so we won't expect to see them until they knock on the door. But if I hear anything, then I will let the board know. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, but Lincoln next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Denise. Just a couple of questions. Just one, and obviously we've been speaking about other professions and workforce and where there might be challenges. Are there challenges specifically around the professional workforce in social work or specifically around mental health officers as well that it might be something we need to be aware of?
Yes, there is. So we do have a challenge around appointing mental health officers, and we've had agency workers up over the past 18 months. We have one social worker that's just completed their training and will be appointed as an MHO shortly, and we have another 2 due to start. Obviously, there is a period of training that needs to take place, so we are actively looking at that, and we may need to use an agency worker in the meantime. We do struggle to appoint to recruit experienced social workers. We do have and have had for many, many years a social work trainee programme, as you well know, Lincoln. And we have 4 students going through that at the moment. What we also made a concerted effort to do during the pandemic was to continue with social work students from the universities. And we were one of the few local authorities that did that. So we've offered about 6 student placements to external universities. Most of them have been young people from Shetland, so we hope that they will come and join our workforce. We've worked solidly over at least the last 10 years looking at different ways to recruit, and we will continue to do that. But sometimes there just isn't enough people around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just on that, I mean, is there something that needs to be looked at the way MHO contracts are put together and to make that more attractive to people want to get into being an MHO or maintain in that role?
We're looking at that at the moment, in line with the review of the job descriptions. So we will be seeking views from social workers as well. So I can keep you up to date on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Suzanne next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Denise. Can I ask about the social work workforce? You talked about the pressures on the workloads and the vacancies there. Are there any concerns that the social work assistants are picking up work that is like above their remit and without the supervision from qualified social workers?
No, I have no concerns. The social work assistants we employ are fully supported by senior social workers, so we can ensure good governance. The level of referrals that they receive, they are trained to work with them, and if anything comes up, because you never know at the start of an assessment if it's going to be a simple or a complex one, then we will either refer on to a social worker if necessary, or they will be provided with the support that they require. But I'm pleased with the governance we have in place for social work assistants. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Denise.
Okay, thank you. I've got John next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that Police Scotland is committed to supporting our communities, especially those identified as being vulnerable and at risk. And they're doing that by liaising closely with national and local partners. And it's my understanding that they are looking to have a policy of integrate trauma-informed practices across the whole Police Scotland network. And it's my understanding that they're engaging with National Education Scotland, NHS, NES, is that right? Terminology.
NES.
Sorry?
NHS Education.
NHS Education Scotland. Thank you. It's up at the keeper. Because on that basis, are you aware, firstly, has this been rolled out to the police force in Shetland? And is there an opportunity to work together for the case of efficiencies with regard to that trauma-informed, trauma awareness?
Yes, you're correct. The police do have, as part of a national service, they have somebody leading on this. On the mainland, we did invite, and one of the sergeants attended one of our trauma-informed leadership sessions. We've also discussed it at the Chief Officers Group, so we will be working closely together. The other thing we're doing as well is taking a trauma-informed lens to some of our services. So just as social work has just done that, where we worked with a group of individuals who have access to our service to look at the process from arrest until they leave our service to see if there's any improvements to be made. And we would be looking to roll that out across all sectors, which would include the police. I think what we'll find at the end of that there will be some areas that we can maybe tighten up on, to not necessarily for efficiencies, but to make sure that the best outcomes for the individuals occur. But yeah, we are in negotiation and in consultation with the police. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise. Now, that is partnership work, and that's what Shetland does exceedingly well, and that's what I'll let you come back to in debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just a question from me, Denise. You spoke about it in your presentation. I wonder if we could just explore a little bit further the challenges that we currently have with operating more adult daycare services within the current legislation. I just wondered if it would be possible for you to explain what the guidance currently allows us to do and the impact that's having on some of the people in our communities.
Yes, certainly. And I think Claire Scott is on the call as well, so she can come in if I miss anything. But the difficulty we have is around physical distancing, because individuals are still classed as high risk, in that you may not need physical distancing between the individuals themselves, but you do between staff members. So we discussed this morning at the Care Home Assurance Group, and what we're looking at doing is doing individual risk management plans to see if there's any way we can come to a compromise and agree an appropriate plan that will allow us to increase capacity but keep people safe at the same time. Claire and her team for adult daycare services are also looking at other opportunities that they can try and create with families and individuals, so that there isn't total reliance on daycare services, that we can introduce other services within the community. But that also is reliant and dependent on those other services opening up, you know, so that we can continue with lunch clubs at Islesborough and that kind of thing. So I don't know if the guidance is extremely complex, and it is very confusing for families and individuals when you can go to the co-op or you can go out to a restaurant for a meal, but you can't access your lifeline services. But we are looking at that, and we're open to have the risk management plans put towards the care assurance meeting within the next month. And we did also agree that if you were interested, we could do a briefing report which would provide you with more detail, and then you can consider that at leisure. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Denise. Claire, do you want to come in on this point at all and add anything?
Thank you, and sorry, I'm coming in on my iPad because my connection's been very poor today, so I hope I'm being heard all right. Thank you, Denise, for your overview there. Denise has captured really the difficulties that we've had in day services for adults with learning disability. So this is building-based day services for adults with learning disability and autism. The guidance has been sparse and not largely focused on building-based day services for adults with learning disability. We have had some guidance in August last year, and then subsequently in August and early September this year. And we're trying to, at the moment, I'm working through that with my teams and liaising closely with public health about how we can increase the level of support that we're providing at the moment. Just as a very brief reminder that we have been providing day services at Eric Gray and New Craigie have been providing support to people who are assessed at critical and substantial, and that's primarily unpaid carers, people who are living with unpaid carers. And we are, we're reviewing on a weekly basis what we can provide and how we can provide more. But the physical distancing is a complex area, and we continue to review that. So I will be updating our risk assessment and our risk management plan. Everyone has a person-centred risk assessment as well as environmental risk assessments around the building. We do have to consider things like transport to and from the building-based services as well, and there's regulations and guidance around that too. I think it's also important to recognise that we've continued to accept new people into service, so there have been a number of transitions, and I can give broad details that without giving too specific details, but approximately 32 people are receiving either 60 to 100% of their day services. There are a further 6 people who are new to service or have been in transition, and we've got approximately 4 people who are receiving 33% of what they might previously have received, but they all have additional support packages and support arrangements round about them that have been agreed. So we are looking to get back to being able to deliver to the level of assessed need, and we have to recognise that there has been change for a number of people, both increase in need and less need for a number of people who were previously attending Eric Gray and New Craigie. I hope that gives you some background and reassurance, and as Denise has mentioned, I'll prepare the briefing report and circulate that to members in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Claire. That's been really helpful, and I think everybody would appreciate that briefing note. And just let me say that there was no doubt that you and your team were doing everything you possibly can for the folk that you work with. I absolutely appreciate that. It's just the guidance and the way it's the priorities seem to have been possibly not in the right places for some areas. You know, it must be very frustrating for families to see that you can go to a nightclub, but you can't access the services that you really depend on to be able to function. You know, it must be hard for families to understand that. So I hope that when we're any messaging that we're doing around that for families, that we really do appreciate the difficulties that they're in. Do you want to come back in, Claire?
Thank you. Yes, I would very much acknowledge that we are very grateful and appreciate probably well, as much as we can. We can never be in someone else's shoes, but just acknowledge that the challenges that this has been for families and people who would typically access our service in a different way. So yeah, very much. We have kept in touch. We will be sending out a further update to families in due course, just when we can work through this guidance and what the meaning of that is. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions?
Hi, Denise, thank you very much for your report. Okay. I was just looking at the figures for child protection case conference activity over the last 2 years, and there's quite a significant increase, or a statistically significant increase in activity in all respects. And I was just wondering if you'd be able to shed some light on what perhaps are the causes of that increase in child protection case conference activity, what's underlying that. Thank you.
Denise?
Thank you. I'll give you a quick overview. I don't normally talk about children's services at this meeting, so I can update you offline at another time. But so there has been an increase across, and sometimes this can just be because you might have families with several children. And when that occurs, then you will see an increase across all the areas as each child is treated as an individual. But we're also aware, as well as just some of the impact of COVID-19 and some of the difficulties that families have faced. But it does tend to be when we work with such small numbers, a large family can have a dramatic impact on what the statistics look like. I think we're very good in Shetland at doing interagency training, which raises the awareness of the need for communities to assist in protecting children as well as everybody else. So I think we are very fortunate that we do get referrals and that we try and ensure that the protection of children remains on everybody's agenda. So we always welcome when people come forward. So the increase is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if that answered your question, but if you have anything more specific, I'm quite happy to discuss that later. Thank you.
We can have a discussion later as well, but it's good to get an overview. And I think whilst it's not strictly in the remit of the IJB, there are obviously interlinkages with every aspect of society in Shetland, so it's good to get an overview. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? No? Okay, we'll move on to comments. Thanks very much for your report, Denise, and thanks very much, Claire, for joining to give that really valuable update. Do we have that?
Thank you.
John?
Thank you very much, Chair. Feel like I've got this top record, this seems to be coming up every other day. We must recognise that the Scottish Government consultation on the National Care Service has gone far beyond the recommendations of the Sweeney report. And we must defend ourselves against the centre-left agenda. There is undoubtedly the biggest threat to local democracy and decision making that we've ever faced. Look at Mrs. Morgan's report. The positive report that demonstrates that what we are doing well. Therefore, the onus must be on the Scottish Government to evidence that individual and community outcomes will be improved by any form of national care service. And I'm delighted that they're having the large number of meetings over this next few weeks in order to get a full, robust response to this consultation that, as I've said before, I believe the timing of it is somewhat opportunistic in order to facilitate the centre-left agenda. But I'll leave that political aspect out of it. Whoops, too late.
Thank you very much, John. Any further comments? No, I would like to thank you, Denise, for this report today. I think this and the work that's gone into this is a credit to all our staff who've continued to deliver for the folk in our communities all through this last period. And I think it shows how vital joined up working is and just how effective we are at doing this and how good our staff are at achieving this. So thank you very much. Okay, so we've been asked to consider and note the annual reports. Are we happy to do so?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to agenda item 6, which is Public Health Annual Report, and Dr. Susan Laidlaw is presenting on that one.
Hello, thank you very much. The Public Health Annual Report's presented for information today. All directors of public health and their teams across the UK produce these reports annually if they can, and the style and the content's up to the individual teams. It's an independent report. So usually we focus on a specific topic each year and try and look at in depth at something in particular that's an issue for Shetland, and also with the activity of the directorate and key public health indicators. But unfortunately, due to the pandemic, last year we weren't able to produce a report at all. And this year we have produced a report, but it is a brief summary, really focusing on the activity that we've done in the past year, as in April to March, and some key indicators as well. So it is really, a shorter document than usual. It doesn't have the quite the in-depth discussion that we would normally have. So obviously the work of the directorate's really been dominated by COVID, going back to January 2020. But public health activity has continued in other areas, because it's not all about what we do in the directorate. So for example, you'll see that childhood vaccinations have continued throughout and been delivered by the primary care teams. And we've also been able to pick up quite a number of areas of work, again, that our health improvement team specifically do. So, for example, smoking cessation and weight management support. And they've been working hard to continue delivering that latterly, although they've obviously had to change the models and the ways that they do that because of the pandemic. So really, although the public health team's been, and still is immersed in the pandemic response, along with a lot of our colleagues in the NHS and partner agencies, but we're optimistic that at some point this will settle down and we will be able to shift our focus onto the national public health priorities, which are listed in the covering report. And I think these are now more important than ever, given the impact of the pandemic, when we're looking at things like inequalities and people's mental health and well-being. Clearly, these topics are not ones that we can do alone in the public health team, and they do require a lot of partnership working and community support to tackle them. So we really look forward to being able to pick that up again in the future. So happy to take any comments or questions on the report.
Thanks very much for that. I've got a couple of questions that I'll just kick off with before I forget them. And I'm not going to ask questions on COVID because I sometimes feel that we spend a lot of time, there's a lot of detail in, and I understand it's been a really key area that you've been working with, but I'm just wanting to ask a couple of different areas, if that's okay. So on page 167, it talks about screening programmes. I just wondered if, since they've been restarted, has there been, have people been willingly attending these screening programmes, or have people been put off from attending because they're worried about the impact, if I'm talking about COVID now, the impact of COVID, or they don't want to put pressure on services by attending them, or are we seeing people are willingly attending these screenings?
Yeah, the main one we'd be looking at there is the cervical screening, because that's where people need to go to the GP practice. But as far as I know, the people have been attending that. We did have a backlog because, as you say, they were paused for a while, but people have been coming back to primary care. Obviously, it's a bit different for people and there's a lot more precautions, but they have been doing that. The other screening programmes, bowel screening is a home test, and then you only get called in if you need further investigation. And we are on top of that's colonoscopies that a few people get called in for, and the hospital are managing those. Breast screening, we only have that every 3 years, so we'll do that next year. So hopefully things will be, settled down that we can have our breast screening as usual next year. And then aortic aneurysm screening, we had a clinic just when the pandemic started, and then we have had another one since. And again, I think generally people did, the gentleman did attend that one. We didn't seem to have more sort of DNAs than usual. So I think in terms of screening in Shetland, just because of the timing and the way that our acute services and primary care have been able to respond, it's not been too bad. One of the problems with screening is it tends to be quite a lag on the data that we get. So it might not be till the next set that we really see if there's been many differences in the actual numbers. But anecdotally, I think we've done quite well and people have been able to come along for that. The other area of screening, which happens as routine, is with children. So there's various screening for antenatal screening for babies and then for young children, and that's all continued as usual throughout the pandemic.
That's really good. Thanks very much for that. And my other question is page 171, the one that gets asked every time it's up on the agenda, alcohol-free interventions. Why have we still not managed to meet the target here when we know it's such a key issue in our communities? I've been on the IJB for 4.5 years, and this continues to be an area of challenge that we're not delivering our targets for this.
There's two bits to that. One is an alcohol brief intervention is an intervention that happens after somebody's been asked about their alcohol. So if they're not asked about their alcohol in the first place, or if they're asked and there's no issue identified, then an intervention can't take place. So one of the issues is about counting how many times people are asked. We know that doesn't happen consistently, and this is about in public health we can't do that. We don't see people, particularly health improvement do, but the public health team don't. So it's about all our colleagues across the other NHS and other services asking about alcohol. And I know we've done a lot of training around this, and we're trying to encourage this. The other bit is people, the community expecting to be asked as well. So if people are expected to be asked and almost, prompting to say, you haven't asked me about alcohol, that's another tack we could take as well. But I know it's been an ongoing issue and we haven't solved it yet. But we'll keep battling away with it.
Yeah, I think some of the challenge, what we've been told over the years, is it's not necessarily that it's not being done, it's just maybe not being captured that it's been done, and that seems to be some of the challenge. But yeah, I think we just need to keep making that point every time we have an opportunity that we know it's an area of issue, so everything we can do to highlight it is important. And I've got one last question and then I'll be quiet. Page 173, the false prevention classes that have ceased during lockdown. I just wondered what we're doing about that and how, this may be not a question that you can answer, it's maybe somebody else, just the impact that might have had on the participants and how we can try and rectify it.
Sorry, was that the falls prevention? I didn't quite hear.
Yeah. Elizabeth, do you want to come in on that point?
Elizabeth probably knows more. I was just going to say, I know that we did look at if the work that they do with the groups in leisure centres particularly could be done online, but that didn't really seem to work. It wasn't as effective for the participants when we looked at it first. But Elizabeth will have more up-to-date information and be able to come in there.
Thanks very much, Susan. Elizabeth?
Thank you. Yes, we're really aware that what's happened is the Falls Prevention Coordinator has attempted to stay in touch with people who were involved in the programme, but we're really aware that folk have become deconditioned during the 18 months of the pandemic, and we've been really concerned about that. The face-to-face classes have now started up again in conjunction with Shetland Recreational Trust, so we're really pleased about that, but recognising that we've taken a step backwards and we need to move that on forwards again. But I think it's all systems go now. It's one of the things that fell by the wayside during the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Okay, any further questions, John?
Yeah, I also intend to ask a question, but I will. Alcohol brief interventions. May 2009, I was appointed as practice manager of Leverett Health Centre. That's nearly 12.5 years ago. At that time, ABIs were an issue and ABIs weren't working, and at that time we were reporting on a regular basis and questions being asked that what's not working, why is this not happening. The truth of the matter is 12.5 years later we're talking the same conversation. Is it time, Mr. Laidlaw, to go back to the Scottish Government and say, look, they are not fit for purpose, they're defunct. Please stop asking us to report on them and find a more solution-focused way to address people with regards to their alcohol consumption.
I'm sure we regularly challenge the Scottish Government around what they're asking us to do. This isn't the same as the targets we had before, but we're still reporting on it. I mean, asking people about alcohol is a really good thing to do, and we certainly know that works. And we know that worked with smoking and had a really good response around smoking. Alcohol, for some reason, seems to be more difficult, and maybe it will end up the same as smoking, as it's much more easy to ask people about smoking and to offer interventions, but it does take a long time. I think you're right. The actual brief intervention that's specified in terms of these, targets and monitoring by the government maybe isn't the best way to do it, but there is definitely something about asking people about alcohol and then taking action around it. It's an ongoing piece of work and we'll continue to tackle it. And I know Wendy McConaughey and colleagues in the Alcohol and Drug Partnership, looking at this continually to see what's the best way that we can do it. But I think, 12 years does seem a long time in public health terms. That is not actually an awful long time. We're often looking at generational changes when we're talking about lifestyle and about attitudes and about what sorts of things people want to do to change their them lifestyles. And I think the smoking is probably quite a good analogy. That took an awful long time to get the changes that we've seen now.
Thank you. Yeah, John.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Leland. And it certainly appears to me that we are on the same page. Yes, there needs to be generational change. What I'll question is that, to say the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same things and expect different results. And it's not so much looking for the generational change, it's looking at how we facilitate that generational change. And it's certainly my opinion that after 12 and a half years, 8 years are not that way. I think that you are in agreement, and your colleagues from the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership are in agreement, and certainly the GP friends that I have are very firmly in agreement with that too. So let's just keep plugging away at Scottish Government. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Jane?
Thank you. Susan, it's just a question around the breastfeeding dropping off, the percentage dropping off, and I'm just wondering if the Henry approach, that multi-agency approach, healthy families right from the start, is that integrated with the looking at the reasons for the drop-off in breastfeeding? So it's just seeing if the Henry approach will support people to breastfeed for longer?
I'm not sure that the Henry approach specifically focuses or has a remit around breastfeeding in particular. Elizabeth might know more, but breastfeeding that tends to be through antenatal care and through health visitor support. But of course, if we're working with families, we know that if you've got one child, then you may well have another child. And that's so certainly having a whole family approach, is the best way to try and do things with that. And I think the other bit is if just because somebody's maybe not been able to breastfeed with their first child, then getting the support to do that again. So again, that's where the Henry approach might come in. I don't know if Elizabeth has, because she works closer with this than I do.
Elizabeth, do you want to come in?
I think what Susan said is absolutely right. I think that probably we're not necessarily good at catching the first child in a family, but then through the Henry approach, that multi-agency approach, that focused support around what the needs of the family are, we're probably better at catching at supporting the second child if there is one. But we do have new head of midwifery at the health board, and she's really, really keen to look at different ways of doing things to understand in more detail what the needs of the of parents are in supporting breastfeeding and other early intervention and healthy approaches to early years. So I think there's work developing in this area, and hopefully we'll be able to come back and report better figures in the future.
Thank you. It is the whole community approach, isn't it, for breastfeeding, and that would seem to fit in with the Henry multi agency approach there. So I'm heartened to hear that. And then also, if there's research monies available, it would be a very interesting part for Shetland to look at that in the whole, look at that as a community led support initiative, because healthy start, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, any further questions? No, okay, thank you very much for your report today. And we'll move on to comments. Does anybody have any comments they wish to make? I don't see any. We've been asked to note public health annual reports and continue to support the efforts and continue to support the work of the Public Health Directorate. Are we all happy to do that?
Noted.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your report today. I think it is clear that there's still a lot of work that does continue. It isn't just COVID, and I appreciate that your teams are very, very busy with that at the moment. And I would just like to put on record our thanks to all of your team for everything that you continue to do. And I'm glad to see that the focus is hopefully going to move to more of the public health priorities of tackling the health inequalities in Shetland. So hopefully we'll see more of that going forward. But thank you very much for that today.
Thank you.
To item 7 on the agenda, which is the timeline and plan for the Shetland IJB National Care Home consultation process, and Brian is leading with that one.
Thank you, Chair. They never start with apology, but I will apologise. There is a slight typo in the report title. It should be National Care Service Consultation Process. We've heard it so many times in the last month. Quite surprised that I've got that wrong, so I do apologise, but it should be a National Care Service Consultation Process. It's really just a culmination of the conversation we had at our seminar last Friday regarding the IJB consultation plan. And the associated timeline. As it was stated last Friday, the consultation period will end on the 2nd of November 2021. We are being supported by the SIC Project Management Office during the consultation process. So we'll be engaging as the Chief Social Work Officer that I alluded to, over 30 stakeholder events in the next couple of weeks. So and that will be taken down from the view that will formulate some qualitative and quantitative information for our workshops, which are planned for the 1st of October, which is Friday, and the 8th of October, 2 workshops to discuss the consultation and start to formulate points of view to go into the results. And then there will be a special IJB, a one agenda item to approve the final draft submission of the consultation. Provisionally, we're looking at Friday the 29th of October for this meeting, board meeting, but that's just subject to confirmation from our committee officer colleagues. So we just hopefully have that confirmed sooner rather than later. It's really just to gauge the view of the IJB that they're happy to approve this plan and timeline, Chair. I'm happy to take any question.
Thanks very much, Brian. And before I open this up to questions, members, if I could just remind you that we're being asked here to discuss the timeline and the plan. So I'd rather we didn't go off on our views on what the National Care consultation process might contain. At this point, I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but if we could just focus on the questions that are being asked around the timeline and the plan for that, because I think that's really important that we don't lose sight of that, because the process to get to the outcome that we're looking for is as important as the consultation itself. So I'll open up for questions. Robbie.
Could I ask if any attempt has been made to have the final consultation date moved a little further forward? 30 consultations and the time period that's involved, just picking an example out of Hanea, seems a horrendous amount of pressure to put staff under. So I just wondered if any representations had been made to Edinburgh to get the timescale expanded a little.
You just come in on that, because actually the timescale did get extended, and that was discussions with COSLA, so I think they've pushed it as far as they're willing to push that particular timescale.
I believe under pressure might be applied.
I think they have tried, but I'm happy to take that back to the leader and take it to the Health and Care Board. But yeah, Denise, if you want to come in on that point.
Yes, it's just to reassure you that we are very aware that doing that amount of consultations is going to be within that time frame is going to be very tiring. It's myself and Jackie Burney that are going to be leading on that. However, we are prepared to do this because it's such an important topic, and I think we have all the sessions set up now and are ready to go. So even if the date changed, we would just we're too far into the process to change the workshops. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come in on that, all, Brian?
I can just say from a chief officer perspective, it has been fed back the very tight timeline around the whole consultation process, and that has been fed back by a collective point of view from chief officers, so it has been fed back through that forum, and I'm sure it's been fed back by other forum as well. Just as I said, it's been fed back.
Okay, Robbie?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got Colin next.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, Denise has half answered my question. I wanted to know about facilitation. Who's going to be facilitating the consultation workshops? Because I think learning from the clinical care strategy, where the consultation process was brilliantly facilitated, and a substantive and substantial product has emerged. Just reading between the lines, from some of the comments that I've heard today and previously, I think the facilitation process is going to have to be at the top of its game. So I'd just like to know who's going to facilitate and how it's going to be facilitated. I think Denise alluded to it though. Thanks.
Denise?
Yes, from the SIC side of the business, then it'll be myself and Jackie Burney with support from business administration. We have a series of workshops booked to include various staff members across the organisation and some of our third sector colleagues. So it'll be quite a mix. We are having online and a couple of face-to-face. We have a drop-in session as well, and we have some sessions that are just there in case we miss anybody out and they want to join in. So we will be focusing on SIC staff and not necessarily NHS staff, because I believe they're doing their own consultation and they will have their own workshops, etc. set up. But what we have agreed is that the information, so that the structure of the sessions will not just be focusing on the questions of the consultation, but it will be looking at the staff's views around the services we deliver now. Do we think we need to make any changes? What would that look like? So that we hope to gather some really rich data that will help us moving forward and not just for the consultation. So we do an empathy maps, etc. So it looks as though it's going to be quite well managed. And then once we've gathered all that information, we hope to be having report or certainly presentation to the elected members within the SIC to feed that back. There's also agreement in place as well that that information will be shared with Brian, so it can be fed into the IJB consultation. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Denise. Do you want to come back in as well, Colin?
No, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Got John next.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very mindful of the structure. The complete hypothetical. When you go and get tough, when you go and get stuff get going, and I have absolutely every confidence in all the officers involved to deliver on the consultation in the restricted timescale. Total hypothetical, as you say. What would happen if you turn around to the Scottish Government and say, well, actually, we're not ready, you'll get it in the middle of December?
I would suspect that our point of view wouldn't be representative during the consultation process. So I think it is working to the deadlines that we've set. So I think that's the risk that we want to have our voice heard as our IJB. And I think it's important that we sort of align to that target date to ensure that happens.
No, I thought that would be the response, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. My only other question would be, set the timescales on for the IJB. I'm just wondering, is how do we engage the community to give individual responses into the consultation process, and particularly those that are particularly hard to reach, that may be utilising services that are under the restriction of the IJB? How do we ensure that we get that shared life experience in order that they input into this consultation process?
I think Denise wants to come in on that point.
Yes, so what we've agreed is that we will put the links to the consultation document on some of the main websites, so NHS, SIC, Third Sector Forum. We've also asked the partnerships if they would lead on some of their own responses. We will be having some workshops with individuals with lived experience, both within children and adult services, so we will be looking at that. So we are trying to ensure they're on the main websites. What's unfortunate is that the government actually hasn't made this really public to members of our communities, which I would have expected given the huge change, but we will promote it as best we can. My request would be to everybody in today's meeting is that they also promote it so that we can get as many individual responses as possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Denise. I think it's an important point, and hopefully we might have some of the press on this meeting at the moment, and they might choose this opportunity to actually highlight the importance of it to the community so that they can feed in, and I'd be very grateful if the press decided to do that. Do you want to come back, Tom?
Just an expression of thanks, really. I started that by saying when you go and get stuff get going, and Mrs. Morgan is just the epitome of that. Just and we are unbelievably fortunate to have a team that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No? Well, we're being asked to note and approve. I'm happy to do so. Yeah. Any further comments on this? You need it to be.
I just want to approve of the thing.
Happy to move.
I think so.
Jane, did you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair, it's just to say that if people, they have a very quick time to answer the emails about joining the workshop, so urge people to look at their emails because they have been sent out, and it'd be good to get those, as many people as possible to join the workshops. And I agree with John about the need for individuals, and I thank the press if they do pick this up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, which is the IJB Business Programme and Action Tracker. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. This is just the routine business programme and action tracker coming forward to IJB to outline future meetings and what business needs to be dealt with. Board members may have noted that there is still a significant amount of business to be scheduled. Part of that is the work associated with the scheme of integration review and review of all associated supplementary documentation, which we have engaged the Scottish Government to pull together a timeline and a way of working to do that. But obviously there will need to be scrutiny from the board level on this work. So that will add to the business required probably in the next quarter or so. We've taken some views to review what business could be undertaken in briefings to members that would just free up a bit more capacity in IJB board meetings. And we'll take that away and just have a little look at that. There is also scope to have an additional IJB in November. I think the provisional date is the 9th of November to allow PRs to allow this additional work to be brought forward. And if happy, we can confirm that date and start to engage the committee colleagues to start the process regarding that. And just to note, some of the planned seminars that we had that will enable some of the work to come before board. For example, the governance kind of seminar that we're trying to get underway has been overtaken by the consultation process. So I think as board members can see, the officers have had to redirect quite a significant amount of resource to the consultation process. They're also, I think, extremely busy managing COVID service and recovery, all those kind of things as well. So I think that there is just a resource issue, which I think that extra meeting will give us a little bit of leeway to give officers a little bit of time just to prepare and get their papers and reports over the check. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Brian. Any questions? Tom?
Thanks, yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm maybe missing it. It's maybe mixed up in among something else. But normally we receive an annual report from the Alcohol and Drugs Park, Substance Misuse Recovery Service, and I noticed that on the timeline. Can you tell me what that is?
It's early in the business to be scheduled. I'm not sure when the submission date is to Scottish Government, because I think that is a report that is submitted to the Scottish Government and it comes via that way. So I can ask the partnership officer for a date on that.
My apologies. It was on the next week that I admitted this to leave. My bad, I thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I think it does just highlight how much business there is currently within the IJB. You know, we know that everybody is under a lot of pressure with consultation and all the other areas going on, and we still have a very long list of planned business to be scheduled. So I think it does just highlight how busy a time it is, and I think that additional meeting is probably necessary rather than nice to have currently. Anybody got any further questions on the business programme or the action tracker? No, I'm not seeing any. Anybody got any comments they want to make? Dane.
I'm getting the hang of this questions and then comments. Yes, it's just to say on the action tracker number 5 about the transition update report of transitions. I support Brian, your proposal for more briefings, and I would suggest that that one would fit in that category. I don't think it needs to be a paper brought to the IJB as such, but a briefing would be good in that. There are very small numbers as well, which obviously leads to confidentiality issues as well. So a short briefing would be good about that one. Thank you.
That's a really good point. Thanks for that, Dawn. Okay. Right. Well, we've been asked to approve the business plan for the financial year and review the IJB action tracker. Are we all happy to do so? Yes. Okay, well, that concludes our business today. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time and your contributions. And we'll end the meeting there.
Okay.